The Incredible Journey, Chapter 3. In the cold hour before dawn, the bull terrier woke, then staggered painfully to his feet. He was trembling with cold and was extremely hungry and thirsty. He walked stiffly in the direction of the pool nearby, passing on his way the cat, who was crouched over something held between his paws. The terrier heard a crunching sound as the cat's jaws moved and, wagging his tail in interest, moved over to investigate. The cat regarded him distantly, then stalked away, leaving the carcass, but to the terrier it was a disappointing mess of feathers only. He drank long and deeply at the pool, and on his return tried the feathers again, for he was ravenous. But they stuck in his gullet, and he retched them out. He nibbled at some stalks of grass, then, delicately, his lips rolled back over his teeth, picked a few overripe raspberries from a low bush. He had always liked to eat domestic raspberries this way, and although the taste was reassuringly familiar, it did nothing to appease his hunger. He was pleased to see the young dog appeared presently. He wagged his tail and licked the other's face, then followed resignedly when a move was made towards the direction of the road. They were followed a few moments later by the cat, who was still licking his lips after his feathery breakfast. In the gray light of dawn, the trio continued down the side of the road, until they reached a point where it took a right-angled turn. Here they hesitated before a disused logging trail that led westward from the side of the road, its entrance almost concealed by overhanging branches. The leader lifted his head and appeared almost as though he were searching for the scent of something, some reassurance, and apparently he found it, for he led his companions up the trail between the overhanging trees. The going here was softer. The middle was overgrown with grass, and the ruts on either side were full of dead leaves. The close-growing trees, which almost met overhead, would afford more shade when the sun rose higher. Those were all considerations that the old dog needed, for he had been tired today, even before he started, and his pace was already considerably slower. Both dogs were very hungry and watched enviously when the cat caught and killed a chipmunk while they were resting by a stream in the middle of the day. But when the old dog advanced with a hopeful wag of his tail, the cat, growling, retreated into the bushes with his prey. Puzzled and disappointed, the terrier sat listening to the crunching sounds inside the bushes, saliva running from his mouth. A few minutes later, the cat emerged and sat down, daintily cleaning his whiskers. The old dog licked the black Siamese face with his panting tongue and was affectionately patted on the nose in return. Restless with hunger, he wandered up the banks of the creek, investigating every rock and hollow, pushing his hopeful nose through tunnels of withered sedge and into the yielding earth of molehills. Sadly, he lay down by an unrewarding blueberry bush, drew his paws down tightly over his blackened face, then licked the dirt off of them. The young dog, too, was hungry, but he would have to be on the verge of starvation before the barriers of deep-rooted Labrador heredity would be broken down. For generations, his ancestors had been bred to retrieve without harming, and there was nothing of the hunter in his makeup. As yet, any killing was abhorrent to him. He drank deeply at the stream and urged his companions on. The trail ran high over the crest of this hilly, wooded country, and the surrounding countryside below was filled with an overwhelming beauty of color. The reds and vermilions of the occasional maples, pale birch and yellow poplar, and here and there the scarlet clusters of mountain ash berries against a rich dark green background of spruce and pine and cedar. Several times they passed log ramps built into the side of the hill, picking their way across the deep ruts left by the timber sleighs below, and sometimes they passed derelict buildings in rank, overgrown clearings, old stables for the bush horses, and living quarters for the men who had worked there a generation ago. The windows were broken and sagging, and weeds were growing up between the floorboards, and even one old rusted cook stove had fireweed springing from the firebox. The animals, strangely enough, did not like these evidences of human occupation, and skirted them as far as possible, hair raised along their backs. Late in the afternoon, the old dog's pace had slowed down to a stumbling walk, and it seemed as if only sheer determination were keeping him on his feet at all. He was dizzy and swaying, and his heart was pounding. The cat must have sensed this general failing, for he now walked steadily beside the dogs, very close to his tottering old friend, and uttered plaintive, worried bleats. Finally, the old dog came to a standstill by a deep rut half filled with muddy water. He stood there as if he had not even the strength to step around it. His head sagged, and his whole body was trembling. Then, as he tried to lap the water, his legs seemed to crumple under him, and he collapsed half in and half out of the rut. His eyes were closed, and his body moved only to the long, shallow, shuddering breaths that came at widening intervals.